I just need to know the commander that signed off on this. Uh-oh.
Where are you going?
I'm sorry if I'm a little bit less animated in this review than normal, but I kinked my neck. I guess I woke up on the wrong side of my bed, in my quarters or something. Maybe we gotta get new ergonomic style pillows, because my neck's been killing me. I gotta move around lately, kind of like Batman. Remember that movie? Batman, when did it come out? 1989, hundreds of years ago for me. But anyway, his cowl, or whatever it was attached to his cape, and he couldn't really turn his head. So he had to do a lot of this, and a lot of this. Remember that? Well, that's me. It's been really bothering me. And I haven't wanted to bother the doctor about it, because it could be, nothing. A pulled muscle. That'll work itself out, right? Or, out here, you don't know what it could be, though, right? It could be Bolian neck slug. Or something horrible like that. And no, I totally didn't just make that up a moment ago. Anyway, with that preface out of the way, this is Lower Decks. This is Season 3. How was your brief reprieve? We all had a moment to take a breather. Whew. Don't have to watch too much Star Trek anymore. New Star Trek, that is. We can just go back to watching what we wanted to watch. Now we can't. Now we have to watch what they want us to watch. And right now, that's Lower Decks. Lower Decks Season 3 aired August 25th. I managed to catch it basically as soon as it came out. This is the animated Star Trek show. Not to be taken too seriously. But is it canon? Some things look canon. Some things don't. Some things probably shouldn't be canon. But on the whole, I must say it looks better and feels even a little bit more canon than some of the live action offerings we've been getting. This is episodic Trek. As such, every episode returns to status quo, which factors into my review for this episode. You see, we had a brief stint with non-episodic Trek, that being serialized Trek, where it's like one big movie cut into a bunch of small parts, arbitrary cuts here and there. I didn't like it. Maybe you liked it. Discovery and Picard. I think, in the main, Strange New Worlds, this show, being Lower Decks, have proven decisively, if I can be so bold, that episodic Trek is back, and it's better. The great experiment is over, hopefully. Maybe they're going to announce the next season of Discovery is going to be fully episodic, as with Picard Season 3, but one can only hope. This episode, called Grounded, is, despite the name, not very grounded. We don't spend a lot of time on the ground, although we do see Earth, which was cool. Our episode opens with Mariner throwing a tantrum, par for the course for Mariner. I didn't laugh once. And we're getting the band back together. Remember, after the end of last season, Captain Freeman was arrested. Ostensibly, it was for supplying bombs illegally to Pakled, which ultimately led to the explosion of Pakled Planet. So, was Freeman the destroyer of Pakled Planet? Well, okay, you and I know she was innocent, okay? Did anyone really think she did it? It was just a cliffhanger ending, pulled out of nowhere. Who cares? When season 1 ended, we got rid of Boimler. Boimler left with Cerritos. Oh my god, is he going to be in season 2? Just kidding. This is episodic joke Trek. For the better. So we resolved the whole problem with Boimler in the first episode of Season 2. And we resolved the whole problem of Freeman's arrest in this episode of Season 3, the first episode. But Mariner isn't very genre savvy, and clearly she hasn't watched Lower Decks. So she's freaking out, throwing things around her dad's room. Admiral, what's his name, Alonzo? I'm not so sure. Alonzo says, "We're Starfleet. We're not going to make a mistake. The truth will come out. I believe she didn't do it." I'm in agreement. Mariner is not. So Mariner has to go on a zany quest to get back on board the Cerritos to do something. I'm not really sure what, other than the fact that they need to capture Freeman's logs. You see, Boimler was making a copy of the captain's logs as the show had gone on for the past 2 seasons. Surely something in these logs can be corroborated with the time it was taken to prove the innocence of her mother, Captain Freeman. That's why we're going to get the Cerritos. But it seems odd that we needed to steal the Cerritos to do this. It seems like one of those things that we could have just did wirelessly. It seems like if the episode's screenplay had called for not going on the Cerritos, they would have figured out a way to get the information off a computer or something. But because this is Lower Decks and we need the big funny, we need to go on the big adventure. So we meet up with Boimler. He's on a vineyard because Star Trek stuff. But he's making grapes. That's right. They're not growing grapes for wine. They're growing up for tiny, tiny little raisins. Boimler's a little raisin man. And jokes ensue. I don't feel I need to reiterate the jokes. I didn't find much of it particularly funny. I didn't really laugh this episode. I had a few little snickers. So I'll leave that to you to watch it if you find it funny. Funny is very subjective. Tendi and Rutherford are at Cisco's Cajun cafeteria, or whatever it was called. I can't remember. Lots of references to old Star Trek. Peppered everywhere. I don't need to go into it, I don't think. Every 5 seconds you're seeing a reference to something. References don't make the show. The show must first be funny. It must be original. That's what you guys wanted. If this was a serious show, I'd hate it. But since it's not, I need to augment how I judge it. Okay? So, lots of references. They're not funny, so I didn't know why they had to be there. Other than for people like me to catch it. Are you like me? Does that matter? You should be able to enjoy it regardless, right? If it's designed properly. A piece of media, as it were. Tendi and Rutherford have Boimler and Mariner barge in on their meal. They're having Ketracel white hot sauce. Another reference. It's on their food. Boimler can't handle it because he's a wussy and can't handle eating spicy things. Haha, isn't that funny? At the expense of our brethren in Boimler. Do you know what Ketracel white is? It's an odd name for a hot sauce. Maybe I won't spoil it. If you want to know what Ketracel white is, you can look it up. It's from Star Trek. But I shouldn't need to preface everything by explaining a reference, should I? If we're honest with ourselves, shouldn't this work on its own? So we have the band back together, and we're doing a Star Trek 3. A bit untimely, given that the actress who portrayed Uhura had passed away prior to the airing of this episode. Because we're kind of doing her scene. Spoilers for Star Trek 3. They steal the Enterprise. And they do it with the assistance of Uhura. Uhura has to detain a transporter security guard / operator on Earth to allow our characters to be up to the Enterprise. In this show, we need to do the same to a transporter operator in order to get back to the Cerritos to find this evidence we need to exonerate Captain Freeman, who we know is innocent anyway, rendering this episode quite lame. You would expect the security guard looking after this transporter to be a wisecracking tough guy who we wouldn't feel bad about bopping on the head, but it's a kindly old man subverting that trope who we just can't hurt because he's so nice and gives us candy. And he is a buffer buff. He likes old transporters. Not my line. Buffer buff is a line from this episode. Buffer having to do with transporters. I don't need to get into it. But we can't beat up this kindly old man. But guess what? Okay. Actually, if you can go to Bozeman, Montana, the site of the first warp flight, remember First Contact? We can go there, and it's a site of a museum now, and you can go on rides where you can apparently fly a replica Phoenix. Phoenix being a rocket, I believe it was a Titan II rocket used in World War III, adapted for warp flight by Zefram Cochrane. Dangerous, scary, makeshift, but it was the first one. You see, impact is a major factor in greatness, and Zefram Cochrane was great. They can take a ride on this replica Phoenix to go to the Cerritos, okay? But they need to get control of it. It's flown by the attendant of this ship, is a holographic Zefram Cochrane, who I believe had his original actor reprising his role. Good on ya. And they accidentally have another occupant, another tourist, if you will, along for the ride that they can't quite get rid of, and he humorously gets thrown into the situation against his will, and then leaves on a bizarre note, but we'll get into that. So, instead of finding a shuttle, I imagine there's millions of shuttles on Earth just waiting to be stolen. No, we need to go to a theme park, essentially, / museum, and steal a ride, like, for family and kids, and hack it to reset its destination to the Cerritos instead of Earth. And we go up, and we don't have stage separation, by the way. So this ship has been modified from the original. It's more efficient. It doesn't need the first stage, even though it says, Cochrane says, first stage separation and all that, just to make it feel real. There's no first stage. We didn't need it anymore. By this year, obviously. 2063, this is not. I guess that makes sense. We can just, because we're in Star Trek, we can just do whatever we want. If we can get to a control panel, we can do any kind of hacking job we want, correct? Well, we do that, and we fly the Phoenix from First Contact to the Cerritos. I think this is more Phoenix than we've ever seen before. I think there's more Phoenix in this episode than there was in First Contact. By the way, we do get a musical drop from First Contact placed into this episode. We get the beautiful First Contact theme playing when we go to Bozeman, I believe, composed by Jerry Goldsmith. Thank you, Jerry. We just sneak onto the Cerritos. We're the only people there, and we find Boimler's his pad. Okay, Boimler had stored in this pad a copy of the captain's logs. Okay, he copied them just because he's such a fastidious. Is that the right word? He's studious. He's astute. He's Boimler, and he's recorded all the captain's logs, but with funny little anecdotes in there that are equal parts embarrassing and equal parts kind of disturbing, like smelling the captain's chair. That kind of freaked me out a little bit. Can we admit this as evidence? It's full of bloopers, I believe Mariner says. Well, yes, you can. I trust this court to be impartial towards such things. If there's evidence to be had, to be presented, I expect that how funny the evidence has no bearing on the outcome of a decision that would have otherwise not had that evidence. Being from Starfleet, I watch this in a totally different light than you might, because I believe in the system, and I believe in Starfleet, and I believe they're going to find her innocent. So this episode is kind of just me yelling at people. It's me yelling at the screen as they scream at each other, because this is a modern show, so we need lots of screaming, lots of fighting. Again, not how I would do a Star Trek comedy. A Star Trek comedy ought to be born from non-Starfleet people. We should have the straight man character of Starfleet in increasingly extreme situations that end up very funny because of alien cultures. That would be very amusing to me. But never to look down on them. We need to draw the line somewhere. I'm getting off on a tangent. Back to Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 1. What are we going to do? Okay. We couldn't beam up to the Cerritos because of a strange happenstance of spaceborne organisms passing through Earth, or the vicinity of Earth, between Earth and the Cerritos, where it was docked, evidently. Very lucky that would happen. How rare is it that spaceborne creatures migrate past Earth within striking distance, essentially? Never? But what is the point of transporters, after all? I'll give you a hint. It's not to transport people. The point of a transporter is for it to not work. You have the transporter so that you can come up with the reason for it to not work to add to the tension. It's just that this reason for it not working is very stupid and not funny. In fact, I may have cringed. These organisms passing through the, Earth's orbit have inhibited our transporter technology, okay? We can't get a transporter beam through. That's why we need to take the Phoenix to the Cerritos. Maybe we should have just took a random shuttle. Whatever. Given that, these creatures, they're eating molecules off the Cerritos' hull. Okay? And they get onto the hull and they start breeding because they have this food source, I guess. They're really just throwing stuff at you here. Bang, 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 bang. Will you accept this crazy concept? Will you accept this joke? Will you accept this very rare happenstance? In such rapid succession, when these creatures started glomming onto the hull of the Cerritos, I was kind of out. I just didn't believe it. Too much. They should have come up with some other reason why we couldn't use the transporter, or rewrite the episode entirely so we didn't need to transport. I had a long time to work on it, but I don't know what goes on in the writer's room. I don't know what these deadlines are, but I feel like this could have survived or done with a few rewrites. Anyway, Starfleet security's on their tail. As you would be, someone is stealing a ship. How often does this happen? I can think of a few moments. But they explain to Starfleet security that we're on a science mission. We're just young ensigns trying to prove our worth. We're just trying to learn about these organisms. And they beam them into the cargo hold. And Boimler wastes no time getting sucked up into a sphincter of one of these organisms, as he's wont to do in Lower Decks. That's just his thing. Boimler gets the short end of the stick. He becomes the stick to get shoved up the butthole of a random creature. In this case, one of these spaceborne organisms. And there's goop everywhere, and it's plenty gross, and they keep shocking everybody. And haha, isn't this funny? I didn't really laugh. Okay, you guys are doing this science experiment. That's really cool. I really like seeing young people take the initiative to do scientific research and avail themselves of such a rare opportunity. I just need to know the commander that signed off on this. Uh-oh. We made this up to try to trick these guys. And then they just asked who ordered this. Of course, that's what you would ask. We're not here to steal the Cerritos to find evidence to prove my mother, speaking from Mariner's point of view, is innocent. And then just when the episode's about to implode in on itself, Freeman walks in, revealing that she's free. They found out immediately that the evidence was doctored. They just clicked and dragged Freeman into the scene to show her delivering the bombs, and it was obvious all along, and there was never really any chance of her being convicted of anything because Starfleet found the truth. That's what we do. We figure out the truth behind things. It's a shame Mariner couldn't see that. None of her gallivanting around, her team building, and her throwing things around her father's room endeared me at all to her character to any degree. She's just Mariner. Mariner continues to be the squeaky wheel of this show. When's it going to get the grease, okay, to stop squeaking and become a fun character? I hope Mariner becomes a little bit more bearable this season, and I hope Rutherford and Tendi kind of get taken back out of the ether and brought into the show and given something to do. My worst fear is that we end this season with annoying and angry and mean-spirited Mariner, and Tendi and Rutherford just not having a personality anymore and just being gone, and Boimler just being a sad joke. Is that what we're going to end up with? Should I be impugning a comedy show for this? If this had come out before Discovery, I'd probably be a lot less apt to complain about this. But we've gone through a lot of shows where Starfleet officers were just not on point. And I know this is a comedy, but it works on your brain after a while. You just crave normalcy, right? And maybe we got a little bit of it from Strange Worlds, but Lower Decks at this time, I don't need a lot more infighting with the crew. You can find a different way to make it funny. I know you guys can. I think the writers are actually talented. I think the show is actually good, as it were. It's just it's not living up to its potential. This episode didn't really live up to its potential, I must say. I think this episode is probably the best season starter the show has had. We're three seasons in. I didn't like the first episode of season 1 at all. Didn't really love the first episode of season 2, but it was okay. I think this is probably the best season opener yet. Not super funny. The plot was kind of bad. A comedy of errors, mistakes in judgment. Oh, I had it all wrong. You know the plot. You thought one thing, but it turned out it was another. But it's bad when you only thought one thing because the character was stupid. Because Mariner was just dumb. She should have listened to her father. He's an admiral for a reason. You know, barring the trope of the secret evil admiral. If you look closely, blink and you'll miss it, there's an Easter egg text appearance of Admiral Jellicoe, who you might remember from TNG. Again, not to get too far into references, there's a lot. If you're curious about references, watch the show. If you're curious about an episodic Trek that doesn't take itself too seriously, watch the show. If you're looking for serious Star Trek, maybe check out Prodigy. But I'm more curious to see what's going to happen in that. I'm waiting for Prodigy to come back. I want to see what's going to happen to Chakotay. Do you want to see what's happening to Chakotay? Not to go off on a tangent about a different show, bringing it back to Lower Decks, Season 3, Episode 1. We end our episode by Freeman somehow being the voice of the audience. Mariner, I've let you get away with so much stuff. I just don't know, blah, 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 blah. It sounds like we're talking to Michael. It sounds like somebody is finally saying to Michael Burnham, you've gotten away with so much stuff. What can we do? In Discovery's case, they just promote her to captain. Now you can do what you want to do. But in Mariner's case, they say, I've been letting you get away with so much crazy stuff. I'm going to bust you down without really busting you down by making you Ransom's responsibility. Have you ever seen a captain just hand off an ensign onto a commander and say, Well, they're your responsibility now. I think the buck stops with the captain. Again, it's a comedy. So you should take what I'm saying a little bit more lightly than you would otherwise take it if I was saying the same thing about Strange New Worlds. Perhaps. We end this episode off with a frame shared by Mariner and Ransom, who've had tension in the past, but now Ransom, according to what he says, consider me your mom now. Ha 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 ha. Well, Ransom is not Mariner's mom. Ransom is Commander Ransom from Starfleet of the U.S.S. Cerritos. Mariner is Ensign Mariner. Okay? This isn't a family drama, I don't think. Although we can have it in there. It just seems a little bit far-fetched, ill-fitting, and feels like a script from a different show or a different genre. I don't know. But the longer this episode went on, the more I hated it. The beginning was kind of bad. Middle was good. Ending... But let's not let that reflect on the whole season, right? This is not serialized Trek. We're back to episodic Trek, okay? This episode is not necessarily an indicator of what's coming. I mean, like I believe I said when I was reviewing season 2, that when Freeman got arrested, I said, they're going to solve that by the first episode. Don't worry about it. A lot of people were speculating how this was going to affect the show. It didn't. It doesn't have to. This isn't a comedic, episodic Trek. We go back to status quo. Status quo, going back to that every episode, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It endears us to things. It makes us comfortable. There's a place for that. Okay? We could have had that in Discovery and Picard, but we didn't get it. Instead, we felt cold, alone, dangerous, beaten, sad. Not a future we want to live in. We want to live in this future. See, things are clean, things are comfortable, and things make sense. That's where I want to be. And maybe if you watch Star Trek Lower Decks, you might feel that way too. So, while this is not a glowing endorsement, I feel this episode was pretty good. Musically, we had a track lifted straight out of First Contact. I loved it, but the track wasn't an original track, so it's lacking in the creativity front, but it fit very well, hit me in the feels. It is what it is. It's always nice to hear Jerry Goldsmith. He composed all of my favorite Star Trek music in the past, bar none. So his showing here, I'm going to count it as a plus, even though it would have been cooler to have a new original track that was still as good. Not that anyone could be as good as Jerry Goldsmith, but your mileage may vary, as I often say. Visually, we got to see the Phoenix again. That was pretty cool. Lots of Phoenix action. We got to see naked Cerritos. We got to see a very cool, what looked like a 2D painting of an Akira class. That looked really cool. There was one frame of that. We got to see Starfleet security ships. Lots of things to see. We got to see cool shots of space, cool shots on the Earth. You know? I think we were in San Francisco for a while. Cool looking stuff. Visually, since this is animated, I will point out that the animation feels improved. The way the characters animate between frames, it feels a lot more smooth this time. It feels like there's a lot more life in it. They feel vibrant. They feel like they're really part of the scene now. There's a geometry to them. They don't feel as flat, although they are flat. So, this episode sounds better, looks better. Plot, not better. Given all this, I'm going to have to go ahead and give this episode a 6. Best season opener yet. I felt good after watching it. I'm prepared for more. And that's all I could ask for, right? Maybe we're going to hit the heights of those 1 or 2 season 2 Lower Decks episodes. Remember, there was like 1 or 2 that were like actually like pretty good. Like they actually like worked kind of as Star Trek and played well and had cool ships in them. The Lower Deck ships, I love them. I think they're better than anything we saw in Picard. Parliament class, anyone? Maybe I'll put it up on the screen. By the way, for those of you who collect Star Trek models, Eagle Moss has been like the premier Star Trek model provider for collectors. Quality of the models, not so great, but they always had the best selection. They prided themselves on having every ship you can think of. Well, they just kind of went under. Okay, they're bankrupt. They're in administration now. And the worst part about that is if we get a cool new ship from Lower Decks, there'll be no way to get a model. I would have loved to get a Parliament class model. I don't think I'm going to get that now, unless it's secondhand. Actually, come to think of it, I don't know if they actually made a Parliament class model yet. But we ain't getting any more until they sort some stuff out. You know, just as a side note, I have a few Eagle Moss models myself. I have a Galaxy class, Enterprise, and a Daedalus class. Some of my favorites. I like the Constitution, I like the Daedalus, and I like the Galaxy. I can think of a few more if I really had to think, but those 3, when somebody asks me favorite classes go, those 3 always come to mind. I like a good ugly ship. I like a Daedalus class. The Dingwall has a spherical primary hull. Not that I built it that way or anything. So, I'm Lieutenant Mark. I'll see you next week for the next episode of Lower Decks. How was your vacation away from new Star Trek? Was it good? Was it bad? How was your first foray back into the fold of Star Trek with Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 1, Grounded? I'm Lieutenant Mark, and I'll see you when I see you.